What would you do if a simple job uncovered a secret that could change your life forever? For one struggling mother, a childhood photo found in a billionaire's office reveals a connection she never imagined. Jason Harlow was a name synonymous with success. His sprawling empire spanned industries from cutting-edge tech to global real estate. Yet, beneath the surface of his triumph lay a chilling emptiness. Jason resided in an immaculate mansion perched on the edge of the city, a cold, lifeless palace that mirrored his solitary existence. Despite the opulence surrounding him, he found no solace within its walls. It had been years since his younger brother, Benjamin, tragically passed, a loss that left Jason retreating into his work. His days were methodical, his life sterile, and his soul untouched by warmth or connection. On the other side of town, Emma Scott lived a very different life. A single mother to her bright-eyed 8-year-old son, Ethan, she worked tirelessly to make ends meet. Her days were a relentless cycle of juggling multiple jobs, cleaning houses by day and waitressing by night. Every paycheck went toward keeping a roof over their heads and ensuring Ethan's dreams stayed alive. Despite her hardships, Emma's determination never wavered. She knew the world didn't offer second chances easily, but for Ethan, she was willing to take every risk. When she landed a job as a maid for one of the wealthiest men in the city, it felt like a small glimmer of hope in her otherwise grueling reality. Emma's first day at Jason Harlow's mansion was nothing short of intimidating. The sheer size of the estate made her feel like an ant in a vast desert of wealth. Towering gates, marble floors, and gleaming chandeliers were far removed from the modest apartment she shared with Ethan. As she stepped through the grand doors, she was greeted by the stern and unyielding butler, Mr. Thomas, whose sharp eyes made it clear he tolerated no mistakes. Jason, on the other hand, was a figure cloaked in silence. He barely glanced at her, his attention consumed by a barrage of phone calls and meetings. Though Emma was no stranger to hard work, the cold atmosphere of the mansion made her question if she truly belonged there. But Emma's resolve was unshakable. She thought of Ethan, eagerly waiting for her at home, his smile brightening even the darkest of her days. This job was more than just a paycheck. It was a chance to provide a better future for him. As she began her work, meticulously cleaning every inch of the estate, she couldn't shake the feeling that this place, despite its grandeur, was hiding something more. As days turned into weeks, Emma's routine at the mansion became familiar. She quickly adapted to the butler's stringent rules and the unspoken boundaries of the household. But it was impossible not to notice the stark contrast between the mansion's outward beauty and its inner emptiness. The rooms, though impeccably decorated, were devoid of personal touches. No family photos, no signs of life beyond their polished surfaces. Jason remained distant, a shadow in his own home, moving from one business call to the next with a precision that left no room for emotion. It was during one of her cleaning shifts in Jason's private library that Emma stumbled upon something extraordinary. A framed photograph tucked away in a dusty corner. The image showed a younger Jason alongside another man, one whose face sent a jolt through her. The resemblance to her late husband was undeniable. Her hands trembled as she placed the frame back in its spot, her mind racing with questions. How could this be, and what did it mean? She resolved to keep the discovery to herself, at least for now. Ethan was a curious boy, filled with boundless energy and an insatiable sense of wonder. When Emma described her new job to him, his imagination ran wild. "A mansion?" he asked with wide eyes. "Like a castle?" Emma chuckled, knowing her son's mind was already conjuring images of nights and secret passageways. Although she warned him to stay home, Ethan's curiosity soon got the better of him. One afternoon, after school, he decided to accompany her to the estate. The sight of the sprawling mansion left Ethan in awe. With his mother's permission to quietly explore the garden, he wandered around, marveling at the fountains, statues, and manicured hedges. It was there that Jason first noticed him. From the second-floor balcony, Jason watched as Ethan darted among the flowers, his laughter ringing out in a way that made Jason pause. For a brief moment, it reminded him of a younger version of himself, a time before the weight of his success had stripped life of its simple joys. Emma rushed to apologize for her son's intrusion, bracing herself for Jason's reprimand. But instead, Jason surprised her by dismissing the matter with a wave of his hand. "Let him be," he said flatly, though his tone carried an edge of curiosity. Over the next few days, Ethan's presence became more frequent. His innocent questions and playful nature were an unintentional challenge to the cold detachment Jason had perfected over the years. Meanwhile, Emma couldn't shake the image of the photograph she'd discovered in the library. Every time she passed Jason, she felt an invisible thread pulling her toward the truth. Who was the man in the photo? How was he connected to her late husband? Though she fought to focus on her work, the questions gnawed at her, keeping her awake at night. Jason, on the other hand, was beginning to feel the cracks in his carefully constructed walls. Ethan's presence had reignited memories he'd buried for years. On one particular afternoon, Ethan wandered into Jason's study with a chessboard he'd found in the lounge. "Do you know how to play?" he asked innocently. For the first time in years, Jason found himself engaging in a game that didn't involve power plays or profit margins. Ethan's unguarded joy was infectious, and before long, Jason began sharing stories about his own childhood. He spoke of his brother Benjamin, their adventures, their dreams, and the tragic accident that changed everything. Though his voice remained measured, the pain behind his words was unmistakable. Ethan listened intently, and later that evening he shared Jason's story with his mother. Emma's heart ached as she pieced together the fragments. It was clear that Jason carried his own share of loss and loneliness. She wondered if revealing her connection to the man in the photo would help him heal, or if it would only deepen the wounds. Torn between her need for answers and her fear of overstepping, Emma resolved to wait for the right moment. In the days that followed, Emma began noticing subtle changes in Jason's demeanor. He smiled more often, albeit faintly, and his once rigid tone softened when speaking to Ethan. Even Mr. Thomas, the ever-stoic butler, seemed to notice the shift. Jason's mentor, Ms. Grace, arrived for one of her routine visits and was quick to comment on the changes. "You're different, Jason," she said with a knowing smile. "Perhaps this house isn't as lifeless as it once was." But the mansion's secrets weren't done unraveling. One evening, as Emma was tidying up the library, Jason walked in unexpectedly. He noticed her lingering near the bookshelf where the photograph was kept. Their eyes met, and for a moment there was a silent understanding between them. Jason hesitated, then broke the silence. "That photo," he began, his voice faltering. Jason's words hung in the air, a fragile thread between him and Emma. She hesitated, unsure whether to speak up about what she knew. "I noticed it while cleaning," Emma admitted carefully, trying to gauge his reaction. Jason stepped closer, his gaze fixed on the photo. "That was Benjamin," he said softly, almost to himself. "My younger brother." He spoke slowly, as though the memories were difficult to access. "He was everything I wasn't: kind, adventurous, and always looking out for others. We were inseparable as kids, but life pulled us apart." Jason paused, his jaw tightening as he fought back the flood of emotion. "I lost him in an accident, and I've been carrying that guilt ever since. If I had been there that day..." His voice trailed off, replaced by silence that felt heavier than any words could have been. Emma listened intently, her heart aching for the man before her. She wanted to reveal her connection to the photo, to tell Jason that the man beside him might have been her late husband, Andrew. But the timing didn't feel right. Instead, she offered a simple truth: "It's clear how much you loved him." For the first time, Jason didn't brush off the sentiment. He nodded, his guarded exterior cracking just a little more. "It's been years, but the pain doesn't go away. I built all this. He gestured to the mansion. To distract myself, but it hasn't worked. His admission left Emma with even more questions, but she chose to let the moment breathe, understanding that his vulnerability was a rare gift. As the days went on, Emma became more attuned to the subtle ways Jason's past shaped him. She noticed the way his eyes lingered on Ethan when he thought no one was looking, the flicker of longing that betrayed his stoic demeanor. Ethan, unaware of the depth of the changes he was inspiring, continued to draw Jason out of his shell. Whether it was asking Jason to teach him chess strategies or showing him a drawing he'd made of the mansion, Ethan's presence was slowly transforming the house from a hollow structure into a place of connection. But the lingering mystery of the photo remained unresolved. Late one evening, while Ethan was asleep and Emma was finishing her duties, she found herself drawn back to the library. This time she examined the photo more closely, her heart racing as she confirmed what she'd already suspected. The man beside young Jason was undeniably her late husband, Andrew. A wave of emotions overtook her: grief, confusion, and a strange sense of destiny. How could two lives, so different yet intertwined by loss, find themselves connected in this way? Before Emma could process her thoughts, she heard a voice behind her. "I thought I might find you here." Jason's tone was calm, but his presence startled her. She turned to see him standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You've been curious about that photo, haven't you?" he asked, stepping into the room. Emma hesitated but decided it was time to be honest. "I have," she admitted. "Because the man in that photo, he's my husband, or was before he passed away." The revelation stopped Jason in his tracks. His eyes widened as he processed her words. "Andrew was your husband?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Emma nodded, tears threatening to spill as she added, "I didn't know until I saw this picture, but now I need to understand. How did you know him?" Jason's expression softened, and for the first time he sat down, motioning for her to do the same. "Andrew was like family to me," he began, his voice steady but emotional. "After Benjamin's passing, Andrew became my closest friend. He had a way of grounding me, helping me find purpose when I felt completely lost. But I lost touch with him when I became consumed by work. I didn't even know." His voice cracked and he looked away. Emma reached out, her hand resting gently on the table between them. "He spoke about a friend he admired, someone who always seemed larger than life. That was you, wasn't it?" she asked. Jason nodded, his gaze distant. "I should have been there for him," he said. "For both of you." The air in the library was thick with unspoken emotions. Emma and Jason sat in silence for a moment, each grappling with the weight of their intertwined pasts. Jason finally broke the stillness, his voice laced with regret. "Andrew always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. He used to tell me that no matter how far I went, I should never lose sight of the people who matter." He looked up, his gaze meeting Emma's. "And yet, I did exactly that. I lost him, and now I find out. I didn't even get to say goodbye." Emma felt tears well up, her own grief resurfacing. "Andrew would never have blamed you," she said softly. "He always spoke of you with such admiration, even in his final days. He believed you were capable of doing so much good." Her words seemed to land heavily on Jason, and for the first time, she saw the cracks in his carefully maintained facade. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden commotion from the garden. A maid rushed in, her face pale. "It's Ethan. He's hurt," she exclaimed. Emma's heart dropped as she bolted toward the door, Jason close behind her. They found Ethan lying near the edge of the estate's pond, clutching his ankle in pain. His adventurous nature had led him to explore parts of the grounds he wasn't familiar with, and he had slipped on a patch of wet grass. Though the injury wasn't life-threatening, the sight of Ethan in pain triggered a protective instinct in both Emma and Jason. Jason didn't hesitate. He scooped Ethan into his arms with surprising ease, his usual aloofness replaced by a fierce determination. "We're taking him inside," he said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. Ethan clung to Jason's shirt, his tears soaking through the fabric as Jason reassured him, "You're going to be okay, buddy. I've got you." Back inside the mansion, Ms. Grace had already called for the family doctor, who arrived within minutes to assess Ethan's condition. While the doctor tended to Ethan's sprained ankle, Jason stood by, his hands clenched into fists as he wrestled with emotions he couldn't quite name. Emma hovered nearby, her eyes darting between Ethan and Jason, silently willing everything to be okay. Once Ethan was settled, Jason stepped outside, needing a moment to collect himself. Emma followed, finding him standing near the garden's edge, his shoulders tense. "You care about him," she said, her voice quiet but steady. Jason turned to face her, the vulnerability in his expression raw and unguarded. "I do," he admitted. "He reminds me of everything I lost, of everything I could have had if I hadn't pushed people away." He hesitated before adding, "But it's more than that. He's brought something back into this house, something I didn't even realize I was missing." Emma's heart swelled at his words, but she knew there was still more to uncover. "Jason," she said carefully, "what happened to Benjamin wasn't your fault. And losing Andrew, it wasn't your fault either, but you have a chance now to honor them both, to be the man they believed you could be." Jason looked at her, the weight of her words sinking in. "I don't know if I can," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "You already are," Emma replied firmly. "By letting Ethan in, by letting me in, that's how you start." In that moment, something shifted in Jason. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe that redemption was possible, not through wealth or success, but through connection and kindness. He turned back to Emma, his resolve hardening. "Then I'll make it count," he said. "For them, and for you and Ethan." The days following Ethan's injury brought a noticeable change in the mansion's atmosphere. Jason, once a man consumed by work and isolation, now prioritized moments that truly mattered. He spent more time with Ethan, teaching him how to play chess and sharing stories about his childhood with Benjamin. Emma's heart broke as she listened to his confession. "He never stopped caring about you, Jason," she said quietly. "Even when he was sick, he talked about wanting to make amends with you." Jason's grip on the photo tightened as a tear slipped down his cheek. "I didn't know he was sick," he admitted, his voice trembling. "I found out after it was too late. I tried to reach out, but by then he was gone." Emma reached out, her hand resting on Jason's arm. "You can't change the past," she said gently. "But you can honor him by living the way he would have wanted you to, by being present, by letting people in." Jason looked at her, the weight of her words settling over him like a heavy but necessary burden. "It's not just about Andrew anymore," he said, his voice steadying. "It's about Ethan and you." Emma blinked, surprised by his candor. "What do you mean?" she asked. Jason set the photo aside and met her gaze directly. "You and Ethan have given me something I never thought I'd have again: hope. I don't want to waste it." His admission left Emma momentarily speechless, but the sincerity in his eyes made it impossible to doubt his intentions. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of Ethan's voice calling for his mother. Emma excused herself, leaving Jason alone in the study. As he sat in silence, his mind replayed her words, each one urging him toward a path he had long avoided. The next morning, Jason made an announcement that caught everyone off guard. "I want to create something meaningful," he told Emma and Ms. Grace over breakfast. "A foundation, in Benjamin's and Andrew's names, for children like Ethan who deserve opportunities they might not otherwise have." Emma's eyes widened at the idea, her heart swelling with emotion. "That's a beautiful way to honor them," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jason smiled faintly, a sense of purpose finally taking root within him. It's time I stop running from the past and start building something better. For all of us. The weeks following Jason's announcement were a whirlwind of activity. The mansion, once a silent and lifeless space, now buzzed with purpose as Jason began laying the groundwork for the new foundation. Architects and planners were invited to discuss converting part of the estate into a community center for children, complete with a library, art studios, and recreational facilities. Emma watched in awe as Jason threw himself into the project, his passion breathing new life into his once guarded demeanor. He involved her in every decision, seeking her input on how the foundation could best serve children like Ethan. At first, Emma hesitated, unsure if her voice mattered in a world so far removed from her own. But Jason's unwavering trust in her judgment gave her the confidence to contribute ideas, and before long, she became a central figure in the planning process. Meanwhile, Ethan's relationship with Jason deepened in unexpected ways. Jason took the boy under his wing, teaching him chess strategies and encouraging his curiosity. Ethan, in turn, brought laughter and warmth to Jason's days, filling the void left by years of solitude. One evening, as they played a match by the fireplace, Ethan looked up and asked, "Did Uncle Andrew teach you how to play like this?" Jason paused, the question tugging at his heart. "Yes," he said softly. "He taught me everything I know, and now I get to teach you." Ethan beamed, unaware of the profound healing his presence had brought to Jason's life. As the foundation began to take shape, Jason's transformation extended beyond his relationship with Emma and Ethan. He reconnected with old friends and colleagues he had pushed away during his years of isolation. Ms. Grace, who had always been a steady presence in his life, remarked on the change with quiet pride. "I always knew you had this in you, Jason," she said one evening as they reviewed plans for the community center. "It just took the right people to remind you." One of the most surprising changes came in the form of Mr. Thomas, the butler who had initially been wary of Emma and Ethan's presence in the mansion. Watching Jason's newfound warmth and purpose inspired him to reflect on his own rigid ways. One day, he approached Emma in the kitchen, an uncharacteristic softness in his tone. "I must admit I misjudged you," he said. "But seeing the effect you and Ethan have had on Mr. Harlow has made me realize how wrong I was. I hope you can forgive my behavior." Emma smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Of course, Mr. Thomas," she replied. "We all have our own battles to fight." By the time the foundation was ready to launch, the mansion had become a hub of activity and connection. Jason hosted a small event to celebrate the milestone, inviting the staff, the planners, and a few close acquaintances. For the first time in years, the estate was filled with laughter and conversation. At the center of it all, Jason stood with Emma and Ethan by his side. Looking around the room, he realized that the emptiness he had once felt had been replaced by something far richer, a sense of belonging, purpose, and family. Months later, the transformation in Jason's life was undeniable. His once empty mansion had become a beacon of hope for the community. The newly established foundation, named the Benjamin and Andrew Harlow Foundation, had opened its doors to children from all walks of life. Every corner of the estate was alive with laughter, creativity, and the promise of brighter futures. Emma had taken on a formal role within the foundation, overseeing programs designed to support single mothers and underprivileged families. She poured her heart into the work, drawing from her own experiences to ensure that no child or parent felt the struggles she once endured alone. Jason admired her dedication, often marveling at how seamlessly she balanced her responsibilities while still being an incredible mother to Ethan. Ethan, now thriving in his new environment, had become something of a mascot for the foundation. His boundless curiosity and infectious energy inspired everyone who crossed his path. He would often be found helping other children in the library or proudly giving tours of the mansion-turned-community center. Jason, too, found himself embracing his role in this new chapter of his life. His once-buried love for storytelling resurfaced, and he began hosting weekly storytelling sessions for the children, weaving tales of adventure and resilience that left his young audience captivated. One crisp autumn evening, Jason invited Emma, Ethan, and Ms. Grace to dinner, a small celebration of how far they had come. The dining room, once cold and uninviting, now radiated warmth. The table was adorned with flowers, candles, and the hum of laughter and conversation. As they enjoyed their meal, Jason raised his glass for a toast. "To family," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Not the one we're born into, but the one we choose to build. Thank you for reminding me that life is not about what we have, but who we share it with." Emma's eyes glistened with tears as she clinked her glass with his. "To new beginnings," she replied, her voice soft but full of meaning. Later that night, as Jason walked Emma and Ethan to their car, he handed Emma an envelope. Inside was the deed to a modest but beautiful home, one he had purchased for them near the foundation. "You've given me so much," he said, his voice firm but kind. "This is my way of saying thank you, and making sure you and Ethan always have a place to call home." Emma's hands trembled as she accepted the envelope, overwhelmed by his generosity. "Jason, I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "You already have," he replied with a smile. "Every day."